That's right. Welcome in, welcome back, folks, to a skill position depth may be an issue for Notre Dame in the 2022 season edition of the Always Irish Show. Voice is struggling still from the virus. Bear with me. I think it's better and stronger. We'll be able to do better today than the last video. Okay, YouTube, hit subscribe if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up if you approve of the content. Appreciate that very much. Twitter, search bar, Always Irish, or at Always Irish Inc. Emails, alwaysirishnd@gmail.com. I am admittedly backed up on the emails, and what didn't help with that is the influx from the Michigan men that are emailing me with various different ways to end my life because I just can't let their recruiting guys go without having my input be heard. So they're flooding my inbox. I got to weed them out and find the Notre Dame people. Audio only anywhere you want me. You can get me calling line 312-900-8815. All right. Really unfortunate news out of South Bend as electric freshman running back J.D. Price has a torn Achilles, going to miss the year. Absolutely freaking brutal. Absolutely brutal. I sat there at the blue and gold game with my dad on one side of me, my good friend Craig on the other. Shout out to you and your family, Craig. I know you're watching. Miss you. See you in South Bend soon. We're sitting there watching J.D. Price streaking down the field at the blue and gold game. Everybody's going, oh, look at this guy, freshman as well. That's the big thing. Young guy. That's exciting. So exciting. I'll say it was the number 2 thing I was most excited to see this year besides Buckner. Honestly, a young guy that flashes like that, he was going to be needed this year, not an extra luxury in the running back room. He was going to play this year and play a lot. So that's just the way it goes for Notre Dame people. It just seems you can't have anything nice. I was so excited. He was literally number 2 on my list of things to see this year besides how Buckner progresses, particularly with throwing the ball. So not great news. Obviously, your heart goes out to him. Speedy recovery, good kid, all of that. But it's just practically not good news at all. This running back situation went from that room being an obvious plus unit you felt like you could kind of lean on to thin depth that's iffy and we're not even to camp yet. Not good. It's just not good. And it's not me being negative Nancy John glass half empty. I'm just looking at the numbers. Okay? I'm just looking at the numbers. This unit went from a few months ago, one that I thought we could rely on behind that heavy, good offensive line, ease the team into the passing game with the iffy wide receiver situation and all that, new quarterback. How much is that going to be possible now? Is a question. So you're down a couple guys. That's the other thing. Like, man, this is just so frustrating. I wanted to see this guy so bad. But you got the Diggs injury, and you're like, okay, I don't love that, but we can make it work. And you see Price flash, and now that's gone. Okay, so now you're down 2 of those guys you thought you could rely on. Now you have Estime, Tyree, Payne. Okay, Estime's built like a Greyhound freaking bus. Estime is. Okay, so you're with Estime, Tyree, Payne. Here's the deal. Estime's built like a tank. You got that. Tyree, when he's healthy, can be electric. How often is he healthy? Not a knock on the kid. I just know turf toe last year, wasn't himself most of the year. Can't afford that now. Don't have the bodies. Right? So this is getting tedious. Again, injuries are injuries. Nobody's fault. That doesn't make it not a problem that I'm going to complain about. Okay? So, it makes me nervous to rely on Tyree that much when he has a little bit of an injury history. You don't know what you're going to get out of Payne. You got Estime, the tank. Better stay 1-1 in one Better be a tank with no parts falling off the way this looks like. So 2 things come to mind here on how I'm going to frame this. One is, after the regular season last year, Estime tweeted something about by the end of next year, everybody's going to know my name or something to that effect. Okay. And he was looking at a depth chart with a lot of guys, how many carries you're going to get. That tweet, I remember it, Notre Dame people, half of them loved the confidence. The other half were like, well, we haven't seen much yet or enough to believe in him to that extent yet. Maybe that's a motivating factor. Estime believed in himself after the season, was ready to take on more responsibility. Physically, he's a beast. We might need him to be that relied upon tank this year. So hope he stays in one piece, that big body of his. Number 2, when this stuff happens, you start to look for any sort of upside or anything to soften the blow. Could it be somewhat of a blessing in disguise for Price to have an extra year now later in the Freeman era rather than earlier? If he's out the whole year and he gains one on the back end, could you argue that overall may be better for this program to have him an extra year at the end of his career than playing early now? That may affect this year's results. I understand that, but there's a lot of this roster that's in flux that could affect this year's results that aren't on this staff or Freeman's fault. Hasn't had time to flip them yet. So could it be, in a way, a blessing in disguise? You're going to get this guy an extra year on the back end when the roster's more flipped with all the talent that this staff's bringing in. Marcus Freeman's further down the head coaching road, more comfortable in that role. I know this isn't ideal. I'm just trying to find a bright side, which is hard for me sometimes. So maybe that's the angle there, okay? I know it's not ideal. I was so excited to see this guy shine. He was going to get a lot of playing time. Even in the kicking game, I think he had a chance to get time, not even just running back. It's just a rough deal. It's just a rough deal. But the bigger issue in play here is you also can't afford any injuries to the wide receivers either. We all know that the depth chart in that area is not ideal, and you're already coming off a few of those guys with injuries, right? So how do you set this offense up? I mean, Lindsey, Wilkins, Davis, you want to rely on all those guys that are coming off injuries or banged up. So how do you set up this offense with the wide receiver issues that we knew we were going to have pre-Diggs injury, pre-Price injury? You knew you were going to have iffy wide receiver depth and who you could rely on. So then you say, well, then maybe it makes sense to lean more on the run to kind of alleviate some of that pressure in the wide receiver room. Lean on that offensive line we all think is going to be solid early in the year. Run the ball more. You got these good backs. Will you be able to do that the same way? Now, I don't know. Maybe you will. I don't know. I'm just asking, will you be able to? But if I'm in a position where I have questionable wide receiver situations and I have questionable running back situations and I have a new quarterback, that's a tough dynamic. Is it not? So then what are you down that you can rely on then? Michael Mayer and then Buckner's legs, basically, then at that point, right? I'm telling you, you're 1 or 2 injuries in this wide receiver room from being in really, really bad shape. I am not ripping on walk-ons, but you're literally going to have walk-ons starting at Notre Dame wide receiver. It should just never be the case. It should just never be the case. But that's my larger scale philosophical, practical issue with looking at this. Right now, you could probably make it work. We're not even in camp yet. You can't afford any of these wide receivers to get hurt, which is asking a lot given their history and the way college football is. But you literally can't afford 2 of these receivers to go down. Now you have questionable depth at running back. It's a tough tough dynamic. Tommy Rees, the offensive genius. I don't know what you can do. Scheme your way out of this one or something, because it makes me nervous. When I'm looking at questionable wide receiver situation, questionable running back situation, you can only go to the tight end well so often. That leads me down a path to rely on Buckner way more than I want to his first year as a starter, both in terms of just having to navigate that on his own and then relying on his legs more than I want to for his safety and prevention of injury due to some of these issues. But the big thing is, you cannot afford more injuries to wide receivers or running backs. You just can't. You just can't. As I've been saying to anybody who will listen, some in Notre Dame land won't. I felt there's way more work that has to be done on this roster than most people will say, admit, or think to get it where it has to be. There's just a lot of areas that aren't where they need to be. So I just, even without injuries to wide receiver, this roster has a lot of work to do and a lot of ground to make up. Now, I'm not saying it's a terrible roster. Brian Kelly's been able to win 10-plus games the last handful of years with this type of roster. I'm not saying it's terrible. No, by no stretch of the imagination. But the goal now is to get in position to win playoff games. So I know that the recruiting is hot and heavy and delicious, and I love it. Those guys aren't here yet. So we got to find a way to win with what we do have and who we do have till those reinforcements and depth and skill guys do get here in droves, which is going to happen the next 2 to 3 years. Okay. So dropping key contributors in the offseason is awful, obviously. Speedy recovery and prayers to everybody who's injured and to J.D. Price. I hope Reese and Freeman can make this work, but you're not wrong if it's making you nervous to see that running back depth, and we're not even into camp yet, and then to see the wide receiver depth, and even the guys we're relying on are coming back from injury. Not an ideal place to be. We just have to see how good Freeman and Reese can work it, okay? Good luck to everybody. It's not easy. It's football. Injuries happen. Nothing ever comes easy for Notre Dame. Nothing. Okay? Nothing. You got to earn everything you get. Going to have to be a really good coaching job, and you're going to need guys to step up. Have a good day.